Did you know that the same laws that govern the flow of water and the universe's energy actually also govern our relationships? Okay. When I found this out, it just like blew my mind. So let's jump right in. I was watching a video on pranic healing yesterday, and I was kind of just listening to it in the background as I was working out. But something that the guy said that just jumped right out at me was that energy has the same properties as water in that, you know how water is always finding its level, right? So if there's a bunch of water up here, but there's a hole down here, because of gravity, the water is going to go and fill that hole, okay? And it's the same thing with energy. And I was just like, wait, what? If this is true, like that has so many implications for relationships. And it just kind of like all these light bulbs started popping off in my head of why my relationship went a certain way, or my relationships, right? So I call the nerdiest person I know, which is my dad. And I'm like, Dad, okay, explain this to me like I'm 5. Like, how is it that, or why is it that energy, flows like water, where it's like finding its level? And he's like, oh, well, that is the second law of thermodynamics. And I'm like, oh my God, you're such a dork. I was like, great. Well, can you explain it to me like I'm 5? So the second law of thermodynamics is that energy is always seeking its equilibrium. What does that mean? So the first law of thermodynamics, I looked this up. First law of thermodynamics is that energy is always trying to conserve itself. So to conserve itself, what it does, basically, the example that my father gave me was if you have a cup of water and say the water is, I don't know, 60 degrees, okay? And then you put an ice cube in there, which obviously is less than 32 degrees, okay? What is going to happen, and you already know this, that ice cube is going to melt and the water is going to get a little bit colder, but that water in the ice cube is going to basically dissolve into that big cup of water, okay? Because it's seeking its equilibrium to maintain the temperature. Because energy, like matter, is never created or destroyed, okay? So what does that mean? What the heck does that mean for our relationships? Well, for me, I was looking at my past long-term relationship and I was like, oh my gosh, when I got into this relationship, I was a professional actor for like 15 years, and I just booked this huge gig, okay? I was like hosting this like nationally syndicated morning show, and I went from waiting tables to making 6 figures in like a week, okay? It was crazy. I was like at my pinnacle, right? Or at least it was starting to go in that direction. And then all of a sudden I meet this guy, and then everything like right after that just starts crumbling, and I'm like, what is going on? The show I was on was being moved to a different state, and they invited me to come with, but of course I didn't have any boundaries at the time. That's another topic. We'll talk about that later. I didn't have any boundaries, so I left that show and that wonderful income and all the possibilities that came along with that to stay with the guy I was seeing, okay? And then after that, I was like, okay, I'm just going to stay here. I'm going to act, right? So I booked this amazing role with this amazing theater company that had been around for decades. And basically it was just going to be me and one other actor in the show and a well-known director. Well, a literal day before we were supposed to start rehearsal, the theater company went under. And I was like, what? Yeah, they've been around for decades. What the heck is happening? But now looking back, I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay, so I didn't know this at the time, but I came to learn later that the person I was seeing had really, really intense depressive episodes and some intense self-hatred. I was not aware of this, okay? And so my energy being up here and his being down here, they had to find an equilibrium, okay? Which meant I had to come down and he had to come up, right? So that's just science, okay? So what can we take from this, right? Well, be wary of who you get into, a relationship with, right? You've probably heard people say that you are the sum of the 5 people that you hang out with, and I think this is the reason, right? But also, that can be a really beneficial thing too. So it's not just to our detriment that, oh my gosh, we get into a relationship with somebody and like our energies are gonna do this kind of deal. Also, maybe surround yourself with people who have wonderful energy. And then what happens? Oh, boop, maybe theirs comes down a little bit, but yours goes up, right? Depending on how many people, like, I'm thinking of like a meditation class. If you start doing meditation classes, all these people who've been meditating for a really long time, their energy is probably vibing up here. And if yours is low, like maybe you come in and maybe theirs goes a little bit lower, but yours like pops up. So we can use it to our detriment or to our benefit. And then not all is lost. If you're in one of these relationships, believe me, I was there. Not all is lost, because there's this thing called boundaries, which I told you I would get to. There are these things called boundaries, which the way I think about boundaries is that they're an energetic skin, okay? They act as an energetic skin. If we don't have any boundaries, like me in my past relationship, no boundaries, right? Very little. I doubt, yeah. So basically, the person I was in a relationship who had the really low energy could be like, oh, look, there's all this like high energy that I really would like. This sounds wonderful. I'm going to take as much as I want whenever I want, because there's nothing stopping me from doing that. So why not? Whereas, I'm over here and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm being sucked dry of my life. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen people get out of a relationship and just have this massive glow up because their energy is coming back to them, right? That was formerly being siphoned off without them being able to figure out how to stop it. So like for me, I had to get out of that relationship to be able to learn boundaries. I tried to learn them within the relationship, but I think my ex was so skilled at, like, just like I was, practicing my whole life to be a people pleaser. He was practicing his whole life and had been conditioned to take, okay? And so he was very skilled at it. And I think I was unmatched, right? Like we were unmatched in different ways, but when it came to being able to set boundaries at a pace that he couldn't, get in there, he outpaced me in terms of like being crafty and getting around my boundaries. So I had to get out of that relationship to be able to get to the point where I could take enough power back to then start really working on my boundaries. So that's one thing. So the energetic skin, like what that does is it protects you if you encounter someone like this. Even if you're in a relationship with them, if you have strong, healthy boundaries at the time that you get into relationship with this person, they're not going to be able to siphon off your energy. So that's going to interrupt that second law of thermodynamics, because basically you're building a dam. You've built a dam between your energy and their energy. So they're not going to be able to take it whenever they want. So hopefully that made sense. My name's Kirby. Like I said, I like to say I have strong, healthy boundaries, and I learned them the hard way. So hopefully you don't have to. If this is something that resonates you, I'd really appreciate if you like the video. And if you're interested in more of these kinds of things, I have a few other videos as well, and I'd really appreciate if you'd subscribe. And if this helped you, I'd love to hear any insights that you had from this video. Like yesterday, I was like, oh my gosh, everything in my mind. I was just like going 100 miles an hour because I was so excited to share this with you guys. So hopefully that helped, and have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.